A is on advancements in forecasting from DERs and data centers to new methods for wind and solar forecasting, and it will be chaired by John Black, who's a manager of advanced forecasting for ISO New England. So I'm going to turn it over to John, but please come in, sit down. There's tons of seats in front. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Good morning. I'm excited about this panel. We have an interesting, much like the panel that preceded it, we have a bit of a diverse set of presentations here, which, kind of vary along two dimensions. So we're generally talking about forecasting, but the look-ahead period or forecast horizon spans from 5 minutes ahead all the way to maybe multiple decades ahead. And the range of topics is kind of was everything but the kitchen sink, and now maybe it's everything but the kitchen sink and something else. We lost our last panelists. They're actually getting moved to the afternoon session. So, but we'll be talking about distributed energy resource forecasting, wind, solar, and load forecasting, and data centers. So I'm excited to talk through and have these discussions. And we're going to start off with Shayan Rizvi at the Northeast Power Coordinating Council. He's going to talk about the NERC guidelines for DER forecasting.
All right, make sure my notes are fine. All right, thank you, John, for the introduction. Go down. There you go. All right. So now that I have the mic working, the clicker working correctly. So hello, everyone. I'm Shayan Rizvi. As John introduced me, I'm a senior engineer at the Northeast Power Coordinating Council. We're one of the, for those unfamiliar, we're one of the 6 regional entities under NERC. I'm also presenting here and as the chair of the NERC Spider WG. This, for those unfamiliar, this is a working group under NERC that focuses on system impacts of distributed energy resources. And today I will be presenting one of the products our group produces, which is a reliability guideline. And this guideline is focusing on DER forecasting practices for BPS planning studies. So just a little bit about MPCC. If folks aren't familiar, right? So MPCC is of course responsible for promoting and enhancing the reliability of the international interconnected bulk power system in Northeastern North America. As I mentioned, NPCC is one of the 6 regional entities under NERC. Our footprint covers New York, the 6 New England states, and then Northeast Canada. So we're talking about Ontario, Quebec, the Maritimes region, so New Brunswick, Nova Scotia. This is the make of our footprint, and right, so overall MPCC covers an area that's nearly 1.2 million square miles, populated by more than 55 million people, right? Big cities, New York, there's Boston, there's most of our load is Canadian, because we have a big Canadian footprint. That's a little background on MPCC. Now diving into the SPIDER work group. So, right, the system planning impact of distributed energy resources working group. This is, of course, one of the working groups under NERC, one under its largest technical committee, and the SPIDER WG focuses on addressing aspects of a growing penetration of DERs, so distributed energy resources, related to system planning, operating, modeling, and focusing on the reliability impacts to the BPS. And focusing, of course, on the TD interface and things like that. So the way SPIDER WG is organized, we're one big working group, and we operate under 2 different subgroups. We have one analysis subgroup, one a coordination subgroup. The analysis subgroup focuses on studies and more in-depth, I would say, for lack of a better term, analysis that focuses on parameterization, so DER models, the DER_A model, folks familiar with that. So it's a group focused on planning assessments, and this is where we'll dive into parameterizing models and things like that and studying that portion of the impact. The coordination subgroup focuses on coordination activities across the ERO, across PC, across planning coordinators, so transition planners, down to distribution providers, again, focusing this material on mainly focusing on the T2D interface and DR aggregation and things like that. So the work products this group produces are in the form of white papers, technical reference documents, which are a little more study focused and honing in on one specific topic. We focus on reliability guidelines, which one I'll be presenting today, and also standards authorization requests which are essentially making a request to and justification on why a NERC standard should be updated in particular to this working group, focusing on distributed energy resources impacts. So now getting to the meat of it, the reliability guidelines. So again, this is one of the types of products our group produces, and this one I'll be focusing on our reliability guideline on DER forecasting practices and the relationship to DER modeling for BPS planning studies. To delineate, white papers give methods and best practices, but don't hone in on specific recommendations. Reliability guidelines talk about best practices and recommendations, things like that, but they get a little more specifics and they go into guidance, and they provide guidance for NERC entities. So think of your planning coordinators, your transition planners, your resource providers, your balancing authorities, your distribution providers, and things like that. So these types of documents focus on that guidance, that impact on what can these entities do to help address impacts. So this guideline in particular focuses the way it's broken out, of course, focusing on forecasting and forecasting DERs for planning assessments and planning studies. So focusing on that reliability portion of it. So this guideline is broken up into, it starts off with how to develop an integrated resource plan. What is an integrated resource plan? Then it goes into long-term DER forecasting practices. So it touches on various forecasting methods. Then it goes into specific DER forecasting approaches. So how do you incorporate DERs into your forecasting practices, and what does that really mean? And then baking that DER focused approach into how does including DERs then translate from forecasting into your BPS level planning studies, and how does it then incorporate and focus on how do transition planners then incorporate that forecast, what that forecast means for a DER specific lens into their planning practices, into their planning studies. And this guideline also touches on, for those familiar with it, the MOD Mod 31 standard. It focuses on the communication pattern in that standard, and how that standard really focuses on assuring the right data is there to then provide input on forecasts, and then of course the data needed for then that will be used for planning studies and things like that, and how to gather that data and collect that data. So this guideline also touches on that a little bit, and I'll be touching on that in my presentation. So starting off with the forecasting approaches, right? I'm sure everyone in this room is familiar with the various forecasting approaches, right? There's top-down approaches, bottom-up approaches. Top-down starts off with high-level forecast, think of your state utility level, and then how to allocate DERs into smaller areas using different geographical patterns and different proportionality metrics. Your bottom-up approaches, right? They build on forecasts from detailed local data. So think of your substations, think of your circuits, and then aggregating those DERs to then represent them in that broader system-focused behavior. And then when you don't have as much historical data to go off of, right, what alternative methods are there to issue forecasts and inform your forecast, right? That goes into some time series extrapolation. You could look at policy-based targets. There's economic stipulations, there's different diffusion models you can do, and then you could also look at customer adoption modeling. So, right, this guideline focuses on, it touches on the different forecasting approaches out there that people can use. Now, what does that mean? How do you incorporate DERs into these considerations? What do you have to do when you're looking into your distributed energy resources, when you're applying them into your forecast, right? You can have things to consider are, how are you going to use these forecasts in your different study types and forecasting and your forecasting applicability, right? You can use forecasts for resource adequacy studies. You can use them for more planning focused like stability studies, right? And you have to think of the impact your forecast has on the outcome of that study. When you're thinking resource adequacy, you're thinking, how does that DER serve that load? and you have to think of the right forecast to use to extrapolate that information into your study. When you're thinking of a system stability focused study, you're seeing how your overall system, how your frequency response is, how your voltage ride through is. You're thinking of how that unit then affects your overall system functioning. So then what forecast do you use to then, so then you have to tailor your study, you have to tailor the input to that study with a different type of forecast. So focusing on the type of study, the planning study you're conducting is important when gathering the right forecast to get your data inputs for that study. Then you have to think of different DER compositions. You're going to have a different forecast you use for your utility scale DER and your retail scale DER. Also, the type of study you're going to run is going to need different types of data. So you have to look at the different types of parameters within your DER model that you're going to take from your forecast to then inform a better study. You also have to try to forecast uncertainty, right? So load forecasts can use probabilistic models. They can use like the 50-50, the 90-10 to express uncertainty. DER forecasts, they lack that exact such modeling due to just limited historical data and things like that, but then are expected to evolve to similarly meet that need. So your forecasts have to evolve to kind of meet that need as well and forecast that level of uncertainty. So then you have to start communicating better. There needs to be a communication pathway between your distribution provider, your planning coordinator, and your transmission planner. Your entities that are going to request the data and use the data, and that's where kind of Mod 31 comes in. So right now, this slide's going to focus on that Mod 31 aspect, and it's going to focus on how do you use your forecasted data specifically for DERs, and how do you relate that back to your transmission planning study. So, kicking back to Mod 31 for those a little unfamiliar, the Mod 31 standard, it provides that authority for planning coordinators, PCs and balancing authorities, BAs, to collect demand, energy, and that related reliability and interoperability data to ensure you have accurate load forecasts. So that's why that standard comes in fair play when you're thinking about how do you take your forecast to then inform a better planning study. And the kind of data flow through Mod 31 is that it starts at the PC level. They identify a need for data. They shoot that need down to the applicable entity, whether that be a transition planner, a balancing authority, a resource planner, or a distribution provider. The respective entity then responds to the planning coordinator's request for data, provides the data, shoots it back to the planning coordinator, and then the planning coordinator reviews that data and provides that data back to their applicable regional entity, who's going to use that data. Their applicable regional entity then reviews that data, and if there's a need for further clarification, if there's a need for further data to explore, they shoot that. The cycle starts over again. They shoot it. The region actually speaks back to the PC. The PC then shoots it back to the DP, the TP, the BA, who would be, but the cycle starts again. And this is all again to ensure the correct model data is there and is being collected to then better inform load forecasts, to better provide clear inputs to forecasts and forecasted data, which of course then feeds back into that cycle for then what will be used in planning studies. And a couple key markers are presented here on what that data means and how that translates directly to a planning study. So you have these three pieces here, DER capacity and type, touched on that a little before. The DER location, so where that load was actually located on your system and how do you represent that in your study. And then that T2D operational profile, So from the DER capacity and type piece of it, the purpose, again, to support that steady state modeling and those base case assumptions that you're going to feed into your analysis, That'll help start to define your bulk power system study, and that's where you can use that historical and forecasted DER data to then create your base set of assumptions, to create your model, to create your study parameters. When you're talking about your DER location, so your load bus, where's that resource actually sitting, Again, identifying that geographic distribution and the connectivity of these DER resources, of these distributed energy resources throughout your system. What this provides, This enhances your model accuracy by by placing your DER within your region, and your local forecast, and considering those different feeder configurations. So now you're getting further insights into how this actually sits in your system. When you're looking to the TD operational profile, right, you're assessing your DER output patterns, and you're identifying risk-prone hours, risk-prone pieces of your system. This, of course, lets you know, this informs your dispatch assumptions and what your future base case characteristics can look like based off your current set of input data. Then what this guideline also touched on, again, this is in that mod 31 kind of frame. This guideline provides a little checklist. And what this checklist looks to accomplish, right? It's a structured way, a structured list of data that you can ask throughout this mod 31 cycle of way to coordinate pertinent questions. This way your forecasts can obtain a level of confidence between your various entities, between the PC, between the DP, between the balancing authority, all the way back to your regional entity. So you can have a sense of confidence within your forecast values, and which of course then inform the study you're doing. So a couple of these items on the forecast, all right? Did you find that reputable source? Where was the data filled out completely in the mod 31 request? Are there any suspicious values when review is happening throughout the process? Confirming, is this an aggregate level forecast? Is it just feeder by feeder? What are we looking at? Are we making sure all the data is available? Then you speaking to, are you tracking your DER location in your forecast? Is it a capacity value? Or like make sure you have the right DER capacity. And are your dispatch assumptions depending on the base case? And then if they are depending on the base case, is there a link between all the base case inputs, and this kind of ensuring that your base case is being set up properly? And are you taking into account any expected operational profile? So did you only assume one profile? Is it based on a few different profiles? And then what are those profiles based off of, right? So this is just another way to then make sure your information is being vetted properly and the data is being vetted properly. And did you understand the method, the inputs, and the outputs of the forecast correctly? Do you need additional weather data? Correct? Weather data helps inform these our forecasted values, and especially when there's some lacking historical data, so that weather data can provide that additional input or additional level of confidence. Or you make sure that data is accounted for. Did you use more than one forecasting method to help kind of validate our inputs? What kind of sensitivities were put in place in your forecast? Were any sensitivities put in place? Are we looking at some high solar conditions, some high wind condition? What lens are we adjusting the base case for that this forecast is providing us? And overall, does your forecast use that kind of, does it make sense? Does it make sense from the higher level, not just from your localized area? Does it have that T to D, that transmission or distribution level kind of perspective? Is this forecast coordinated with your neighbors, or is it more insular to your area to see what your neighbors are doing if things align there? Does the output of your DER match your assumptions, right? That's going to change the level of your forecast. That's going to change the value forecast, which will then, of course, have impact on your studies. Did forecast sensitivities include any other data? Was policy data input, was market data input, were economic changes input? Again, this kind of feeds back up to what kind of forecast method did you use? And again, how sensitive is the forecast? Again, going back to the kind of forecast methoding you use and things like that. So this guideline provides just that checklist so folks can keep these top of mind when they're going throughout this mod 31 process, while they're collecting data and trying to put that, eventually use that data into your forecast values, which then, of course, as I mentioned, I'll repeat, feed into your planning studies, and the results of those studies have impacts on assessing your system. And just to kind of close this out with the recommendations that I've kind of tried to hit on in this presentation, what this guideline recommends is, right, it's essential, that coordination piece. Our TPs and our transition planners and planning coordinators actually coordinating with their resource planners to discuss their DER forecasting in the region. And as I discussed previously, are you aligning with your neighbors as well? Load forecasting and planning departments should both be aware of how to meet their transition planning or planning coordinator requirements. These two departments can work in silos, and it's kind of to bring that information together to make sure everyone's on the same page, right? Because the forecasting then influences the planning piece of it. Do your resource planners, are they coordinating with, again, your neighbors? Are they coordinating with their adjacent resource planners and things like that? Making sure your system is correct, but also the broader system your planning studies will affect make sense as well. And again, going back to the previous slide, develop that checklist. It just serves as another way to then be coordinated among you, between everyone in the process, all stakeholders and your neighbors as well, ensuring that the right information gets put, or the information that could be as correct as it can be put into your planning studies, which of course impact operationally your system, which impact the modeling assumptions you make and things like that in your studies. And then the last piece is knowledge gathering communication. Try to attend and contribute to forums just like this, where applicable, just to get that information out to make sure other folks know what you're doing, and maybe that can affect their best practices. And that is all I have, and I'll just make one last plug for folks. If you would like to join the SPIDER WG, the System Planning Impact of Distributed Energy Resources Working Group under NERC, please reach out to me or use the link that's provided here. This is a good forum, a forecast forum that our group doesn't necessarily always get to see and get visibility to. So we're always looking for that input back into our work product. So please reach out to me or follow the link to join the group. It'll be very much appreciated. And thank you.
Thank you, Shayan. I really like that presentation because I think it does a good job of contextualizing long-term forecasts, and in particular DER long-term forecasts. You know, I know my team spends a lot of time thinking about these types of things. We do not forecast in a vacuum. We spend a lot of time supporting transmission planners and such, translating our forecasts into inputs or assumptions into all these downstream studies. And the other thing I like about the contextualization is, you know, we tend to focus on the bulk power system at an ISO, RTO, but, you know, that T&D interface and how all the other downstream users of our forecasts that are thinking about distribution planning and all that stuff, it really sheds a lot of light into, you know, all the downstream uses, and how, you know, I'm often just dumbfounded how folks like transmission planners think about our forecasts is actually very different oftentimes than how my team thinks about its own set of forecasts. And really, again, those forecasts only have meaning in how they are used downstream. So this is really, really critical. So thank you, Shayan, for that presentation. So next up, we have Amir Javanbakht from Clean Power Alliance, and he's going to be talking about another aspect of this thing, which is load characteristics. Load forecasters are really defined by what the downstream needs are. Load characteristics change. We used to only be concerned about what the peak load is at a certain time of year, what the summer peak was. And I know in New England now we're concerned about summer, winter peak, minimum load in, you know, midday, afternoon sort of thing. So Amir, come on up and share your perspective on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Black. I've known him for 8 years now. I remember one time we were having breakfast with Mr. White and Mr. Pink, talking about tipping etiquette and protocol. Wait, no, that was Reservoir Dogs. I'm sorry. I'm getting old and can't remember things like I used to. So I'm going to be talking about forecasting DER or DERs and their impacts on load. I think in the program it says DER impacts on load forecast. I couldn't make up my mind what I wanted to name the title of this presentation. So I'm going to run a couple more by you just to see if those were worth it or if I made the right choice. Gone with the load, chasing forecasts in the DER age. There you go again, rethink the load curve. And then my personal favorite, whose load is it anyway? The DER effect on demand. So thank you. I'm not going to quit my day job, but I know it's a little fun thinking about those. those titles. Did it go? Maybe it's just me.
Those jokes broke the remote. Just use the down.
My wife would agree, they break a lot of things in the house, so. I am from Clean Power Alliance. For those who don't know, we are the largest community choice aggregator in California. Community choice aggregator is a program where communities governed by local officials can get together and buy electricity on behalf of their customers. This is an alternative to the IOUs or investor-owned utilities of how to procure energy and where your energy comes from. This allows communities to really focus on what is their priority when it comes to electricity consumption. So as a CCA, we do not own any of the wires. We don't deal with any of the real-time operations. So my presentation will solely be focused on energy, that construct. We serve Los Angeles and Ventura counties. We have over 3 million customers, and I think it's about 35 or 33 towns and territories that we serve. We are actually the 4th largest electricity provider in California behind the IOUs. And one thing that my company really likes to talk about is being green. Pretty much it's in all our energy portfolios or the rates that we serve. So we are ranked #1 by NREL in terms of green electricity served, and this is above the renewable portfolio standard that is required by the state. So that is a big goal for ours to be as carbon neutral and green as possible electricity. I'm gonna just briefly talk about DERs so we can kind of be level set on the same page. I've had conversations with other people that they may view differently, but I wanted to lay down my definition. So lines, and everybody's level set on the rest of the presentation, and you're less confused or less bored than you probably would be. So this is small scale energy generation or storage that's located to where the energy will be used or consumed. This is not grid scale or large interconnections. These are just really close to where they're being consumed, the energy. These are a list of things that could be defined as a DER, probably scraped it off the web somewhere. But the technologies that I will be discussing in particular are EV, PV, storage, and electrification, or in this case, heat pumps for us is quite important as we try to electrify and reduce our carbon footprint. I'm so glad Shayan had spoken earlier because everything he said is important, but I will not be touching on pretty much any of that. So it's very complimentary, and I will not be stepping on anybody's toes, which is also a great thing. And I have to put this as a footnote at the bottom. Everything that I will be discussing will not be taken into account what is happening at the federal level at the moment. And for those of you who know what I'm talking about, great. For those of you who do not, please ask a friend because I do not want to get too political this early in the day. So as the presentation goes, you'll see a very structured approach to this. I am very orderly and like things precise in a particular way. So you'll see either megawatts, megawatt hours, gigawatt hours on the left, which also has a "we are here" flag, right? So if you look at a map, this is where you are. As we adopt DERs, this is where we are, and this is where we're going. So it's a roadmap. And on the right side, you will see our incremental impact on an hourly average of sorts from our base forecast in 2024. So our forecast that we produce internally 3 to 4 times a year has a base forecast that accounts for everything that's already been in our systems, and then we kind of add these on top of it. So our load modifiers, if you will be added on top of all our forecasts. So if you see why we have so few, it's because this is incremental. So if you think about 24 to 25, that 25 is that incremental impact. PV is pretty much the most well-known DER around. It's not too new. Everybody's probably familiar with it. But we have about 640 megawatts of installed capacity in our service territory. Currently, we are projecting it to double by 2040. So that's a significant impact that will cut out into the middle of the day. And that average will be on an hourly level. I mean, as you go throughout the year, it changes from your capacity of what you're able to produce. But on average, by 2040, we'll go up to extra 360 370 megawatts of installed capacity that we'll have to account for and how to mitigate. So I think this one's the most well understood. The others I'll probably talk about in a little bit more detail. Storage, behind the meter storage. I think a lot of people get a misconception that storage will save us all. It's a tool. I don't think it's a silver bullet, in my opinion. There are a lot of things that are great about storage, but there's some things that I think, we need to be wary of. So round trip fuel efficiency, I think for grid connected, it's somewhere in the 90%. For homes and commercials, it's only 84. So if you think about, you have to charge your battery 2 kilowatt hours, you're only gonna be able to discharge 1.68. So you already lost some energy right there. So at that point, you're actually consuming plenty more than you're going to be actually able to discharge. There was a study by the Self-Gen Installation Program with the California Public Utilities Commission that looked at a lot of customer behavior and what they were doing, and they found that people are not discharging to the minimum state of charge frequently enough. So they found that people are discharging only to 25% when it could have gone down to 15, which is an industry standard, and even low as single digits for some batteries. So they're not even discharging fully when they could be taking advantage of it. We are experiencing in California mostly residential impacts, and this was something I thought was really interesting. So I talked to the CEC, I talked to S&P Global, and what really conclusion it came down to is it's just easier for residential to install storage. Commercial is having a harder time because you may have to do hardware upgrades, line impacts. You may not have the place for it in your office or place of business. But rooftop solar, commercial led the way because you just put it on the roof and it's free energy. So we're seeing a lot of impact installation on residential areas. In California, as of April 2023, when NEM 3.0 came into place, storage and PV had become extremely intertwined. So much though that in the modeling that I've been doing, I literally have pre-April 2023 and post-April 2023, because that relationship is really strong. And this is something that CEC has noted as well in their presentations. The reason for this is a CPUC ruling that says you cannot discharge or you cannot send energy back to the grid at the retail or wholesale rate. It's at a very complex cost avoidance, which I will not get into because I do not understand, but pretty much it makes people want to install storage as they buy PV panels, which is great, because then you're not just sending it out and have these negative prices. You can actually use it for your on-site premises. Right now we have over 120 megawatts of installed capacity. By the end, we'll almost hit 500. So as you can see, it's very correlated to PV installation. It's a very similar shape. We're seeing almost a 1-to-1 ratio. And this is an hourly average for the year on the right. As you can see, during the midday hours, people will charge up to about 85 megawatts. But then in the evening peak, they will only discharge about 55. So some of that is behavioral change because you have a smaller window for solar. But in the evening peak, you have maybe a little more that you want to kind of do to shave off your peak hours. But it's still, as you can see, you're charging more than you are discharging. So this profile is very interesting. I'm going to see if the behaviors change over time, but that's what we're kind of predicting right now. Electric vehicles is the behemoth of this all. We are going to see probably a 10-fold increase in terms of our vehicle count and our gigawatt hours served within our service territory from now until 2040. The graph on the right is extremely important because this is a Clean Cars Advance 2 from California Air Resources Board that says this is a supplier side mandate that manufacturers must sell vehicles at a particular percentage to be plug-in hybrids at least 40 to 40, I think 40 right now, but up to like 60 and 80 later on. They have to have that kind of battery storage in them or fully electric, right? So by 2035, we should have all new car sales being fully electric. And the reason the graph keeps increasing even after 2035 is because that's new vehicles. You're still going to get the turnover of a car's life, right? So you could see people probably approaching 2035, buying a lot of ICE cars. But then once that hits, people will have to buy new electric vehicles. So as their cars get older and they turn over, they'll buy more electric vehicles. So this is an extremely important component to the DERs that we're looking at. We're running a smart charge program that I'll get to shortly. So we define internally, there are 5 stages to charging. We call this unmanaged. Just think of it, you get home, you plug in the car, you start charging. Nothing happens, there's no mitigation around it, it's just instantaneous. That's unmanaged. Managed means you've had your car or your charger set up a time that you want it to charge. So that's what we're defining as managed, right? So there's some sort of mechanic around it, probably around when you have the lowest rates, maybe we have solar, we don't know, but that's probably some sort of managed charging profile. Smart is what our managed charging profile is, our program is doing, is telling you, hey, when do you need your car to be ready by? And then from there, we run an algorithm, or our vendor does, I don't do it, and they say, okay, lowering the cost on you as a consumer, when can we charge? Okay, looking at the carbon footprint, when can we do this? So now it's telling the vehicle when to charge. So if you have it charged from, let's say you get home at 12 and you plug it in, maybe it starts charging at 12 and then it stops at like 4 when the prices become really high, your rates become high, and then rates become low at midnight, it starts charging in. But then you've had it plugged in this whole time. So that's what smart charging does. Smart solar will actually rely on solar panels on your house or your business. And it'll rely on those to charge and make sure that, hey, you plugged it in, we know you need it ready by this time, we're gonna use your solar power to actually charge, so now you don't have to worry about sending electricity to the grid, and now you're arbitraging. And then the last is V to X, vehicle to grid, vehicle to home, vehicle to load, whatever you would like to call it. This is something that's being discussed pretty frequently, especially at the Vehicle Grid Integration Council, of how to make this happen. And if we make this happen, what does this look like? So we have to make a bunch of assumptions around this. And in the end, internally, we've come up with these profiles. And these are incremental to the base year. But as of right now, by 2040, on an average day, we could see an increase of 1,100 megawatts in hour 2 based on the current structure of everything else. And that's a big one, right? 1,100 megawatts is not something to sniff at, especially overnight where, you know, there's no abundance of solar to charge. So this is something we're definitely keeping a very, very close eye on as we kind of look through the forecast and how it changes and what we actually do see happen with our managed charging program. And the last one, I'll throw it in there. It's not the biggest component of it all, and it's not necessarily all that exciting. So in Southern California and LA Ventura counties, we will be required at some point by regulations starting 2030 to electrify and use heat pumps instead of having new gas furnaces. So we're going to get some electrification. It is not all that much in the grand scheme of things. In our service territory, we have temperate climates considered, you know, compared to, you know, ISO New England. So we don't have to worry too much about electric heating. Analysis has shown that for every megawatt we serve for a cooling load, we would only maybe do 1 or maybe a half. So it's a 2-to-1 ratio. So 2 to cool, only 1 to heat. And I think that's even being a bit generous at times. So by 2040, I mean, we're only going to add on average December day, 60 at the most, which is really not all that much. And even some of that during the hours 9 and 10 could be, you know, offset by possibly solar and stuff like that. So electrification is important, but it's not the biggest deal for us. What does that mean? So you listen to the whole spiel I gave. What's the point of all of this, right? The conclusion. We need to be prepared for this that's coming. So right now we have our evening peak in the summertime. We will be shifting that from summer to winter. And the reason why it happens at the end of the year is because by then you'll have more EVs at that point in our system than we have at any point throughout the year. So typically our EV load will impact our peak to a point that will shift from summer to winter. And then it goes into winter, it goes from evening to overnight. So now we could have a peak load that will be happening at 1, 2, 3 in the morning. And these are simulations we run, so they're obviously not exact, but this gives you an idea. And the new peak will actually be higher than our current peak. And that's a scary thought, right? So the idea of 3 compounding things, that's going to make it a lot more difficult for us to procure load, prepare things. And I am very thankful I just produced a forecast and I don't have to worry about what happens on the transmission and distribution lines. So Shayan, I wish you the best. Luck on that. So I think this is something that we've been talking to our procurement team about, and they know about it. Will this manifest? Will this not manifest? We don't know. CEC is not very affirmative on what they're saying is going to happen, but based on the current strong constructs, this is kind of a consensus in California that this is a possibility. So for everybody at CAISO in 15 years, we'll see you when we get there, and we'll see if that happens or not. So thank you.
Thanks, Amir, especially for the jokes. I do wonder how much potential federal policy changes might change that outlook. And I also kind of wonder, is that hour 2 peak really going to happen? Like you said, you don't have to worry about it, right?
Tell me something that makes it happen otherwise. Right now.
We'll let people ask. We'll let people ask the question. Sorry, I don't mean to get ahead of where we're at. So thank you, Amir, once again, especially for the jokes. So the next up we have Farzan from Quanta Technology, and she's going to be talking about forecasting electrification and data centers. So this is a little more of the kitchen sink.
Good morning, everyone. Farnaz Farzan from Quanta Technology. I lead our forecasting practice area, but another area I have also is I work on integrating DER electrification into transmission, distribution, and markets, planning and investment. So I work, due to the type of work I do, I work on the forecast side of things and also their implication on planning. On a personal note, this year I challenged myself to talk less and listen more. So thanks, John, for giving me only 15 minutes. So I'll be high level. I'll try my best to be brief, but looking forward to hearing more from my fellow panelists and Q&A and other, further discussions later. So today I'm going to talk about forecasting of electrification and data centers. And I want to take a step back and look at how the load utilities in the US have seen over past 3 decades. After 3 decades of slow growth, or sometimes even negative growth because of energy efficiency, and by energy efficiency, I don't mean only energy efficiency programs, but also the inherent efficiency improvements in the appliances, in the technology. So the planners are seeing high growth after 3 decades, and this is the growth they're not used to. When the amount of growth is important, but the type of growth, the nature of the load is also different. So we have 2 types of growth. One is per capita, your existing customer base uses more. So this is what we saw when, in the 60s, and when people were adopting air conditioners, or later. But the other type of growth is new customers. And today we see more, we see both of them. And a good portion of our growth is per capita growth. And that's the part about electrification, adopting EVs, building, heating, etc. So this is so not only the amount of load has changed, but also the characteristics of the load. Now, this increase is really driven by 2 different causes. One, data center industry, and the other one is electrification. When we look at data center is the internet. Every household, every business, they use it on a daily basis, and their the way we depend on it and we use it is just increasing, and it's changing over time. If you look at how the industry has evolved, and I'll talk more about it, but their locational and business priorities have shifted. If you look at, early 90s through the first decade of 20th century, they were all concentrated along the coastlines where the transatlantic cables are coming to the US. Now they are shifting more inland around metropolitan areas. So these have implications for forecast. And, there are many projections, very rapid projections and significant projections of growth for data centers. When we talk about electrification, we are talking about both transportation electrification, electric vehicles, rail systems, port facilities, and also what we call stationary electrification, which is basically using electricity for, building heating, industrial processes, things of that nature. And this is really due to technological advancement as well as government policies and societal concerns about air quality and environment in general. So I'll start with data centers. And I think one thing I want to, a point I want to make is that considering data center as one single industry is like considering commercial building industry as one. And, ignoring the fact that different buildings are, we have different buildings, different operational, different business models. And the same thing with the data centers. And if you look at the growth that I'm showing here from 1990, 2020 and beyond, the growth of the overall growth of the industry is larger than the growth of individual segments. You see this exponential growth, which is the result of sideways growth of the industry. So it's basically breaking into different segments. New segments are created that they have different IT-related requirements. They come in different sizes. They have different owners. The operational needs are different. And it's just, if you look at it, is kind of like as if you have stacked multiple S-curves. So each individual segment might be following a typical S-curve growth, but when you look at it in combination, the overall growth, the aggregate growth looks different. Now, the best analogy is the petroleum industry. When it started, it was petroleum industry. They just, unlike lamp oil, and then it changed into petrochemical industry, which is, a lot of products from different fuels to synthetic fabrics, and it's a huge industry today, cornerstone of global economy. So I think data center of today is very similar to petrochemical industry, petroleum and petrochemical industry, and we can learn lessons from how that industry grew. Now, when we talk about data center forecast, we are looking at two different situations. In certain areas, we have existing history of data centers, and not only existing history, but when you look at the pipeline, the interconnection requests of utilities, we have good amount of information. So for these types of situations, we can use our conventional methods of forecast. You can look at, the historical trends by amount, by location at different granularity levels from zonal to substation to feeder level. And then, looking at different load curves, depending on the segment. For example, if you are just supporting basic internet versus your cloud versus your AI, is it how the load during training phase and inference phase, how those different. So studying those and incorporating those into the forecast, and applying different, trending econometric demographic models based on the historical data to project the future growth. And I think the other important thing is to develop scenario-based forecasts. The examples I'm showing here is from a study we conducted in one of the large metropolitan areas in the US very recently. And I wanted to point out the importance of scenario-based forecast. I think you see how as you go further, that range of variation widens. And just to put it into in context, we are talking about 20 to 25% of 2023 peak by 2033. So in 10 years, in lower scenarios, and in higher scenarios, we are talking about 40 to 60% of 2023 peak in 10 years. So this is a huge range, and it has implications for planning. And locationally also, we can have different scenarios. Are they going to cluster more around existing data centers? What about the local governments that provide incentives for data centers? They expedite permitting, for example, and they make it more attractive for data centers to go to their area. So these are different scenarios that you need to look at, even when you have rich historical data. Now, on the other hand, when you don't have past history, most forecast methodologies, to be reliable, they rely on historical data. So for places that, and this is actually often both with data centers and electrification, but a lot with data centers. So we need to look at methods like template forecasting based on similar regions with historical data, and then map it to the specific local parameters. And we look at driving factors based on industry behavior. For example, how the deployment trends work based on land use and zoning, based on incentives, based on available delivery capacity, proximity to transmission lines, proximity to major airports. These are all the driving factors we see based on our studies. And also, for different segments, this could be different. The example I show in this table is for co-location data centers. So you see how we have different criteria, and they have relative weighting. So we need to, incorporate these into our forecast. I'll end with this, that for data centers specifically, we want to combine three different perspectives: econometric and demographic, which is a very classical way of forecasting; societal and consumer business, how consumers and how they use the services that data centers provide; and then industry-specific perspective, what industry says about itself, what those reports say, not to take their word as it is, but to understand their behavior. And the three perspectives should be studied, compared, contrasted, to understand what each they say, and what they contradict, where they contradict one another, and how to address that. All right, so after this, I'll quickly shift to electrification. So mostly with transportation electrification. So we look at four different components: light duty vehicles, both residential and also light duty, medium duty commercial. These are seen as really basically like an end use category. Then we have public charging network, both at local level and over the road. So the local level is similar to your gas stations, and these are really commercial customers. The over the load are like truck stops. So these are industrial. So when we look at the class of customer, we need to look at their interaction with other classes. And then the fourth one is the fleet, both light, medium, and heavy duty. And these could be existing customers that electrify their fleet or new customers. So they each have their different characteristics. Now, with light duty forecast, there are three different steps or three important components about forecasting light duty forecast. The first step is to forecast adoption. How many EVs are expected in coming years? How the adoption rate changes from one location to another? What types of EVs people will adopt? And and in different classes as well, different EV models, different classes we have. So this is really the adoption forecast. So that's kind of like the foundation. You want to know how many EVs. Now, the second part that, again, that makes it more of an end use model forecasting is behavior and technology representation. To Amir's point about how these guys charge their EV and different, type of cost. Do they charge at home? Do they charge at work? And you need to bring other sources of data to mileage travel, when they normally charge, and do they do managed charging? Do they do smart charging? Do they have on-site generation like solar to do this? So this is really that to understand their behavior, especially in the absence of having historical data, but which we don't in many places. So this is really to get that information and then be able to simulate or estimate the load shapes. This is important because, for example, in some cases, you might have AMI data and you can, if those customers have EV, you can use that data to understand, to extract the load behavior, or you can get the data from chargers, the EV chargers. But in the absence of that, you need to look at simulation, and the hourly load is important for T&D planning. The conventional peak planning is changing. The way T&D system is designed is that, transformers cool down overnight. Now, with shifting to overnight charging and with enough adoption, this load is flattening. And that means that cooling window is shortening, which means now as T&D planners, we need to go back and revisit the way we rate different equipment. So this is really a very important part of LD forecast and any of these, emerging technologies, to be honest. With medium duty, heavy duty forecast, we take a slightly different approach. Oh, something else I thought would be worth mentioning. With light duty forecast, a lot of times people focus on new vehicles. I think we need to also look, especially as we have more EVs, we have to look at used cars as well, used EV. Think about it. This is the load that can move. They can move from one feeder to another, from one region to another. And they move to places with different demographics. So it's actually pretty cool. It makes it very interesting to forecast. But that's one thing that we shouldn't forget. And I think as we will see more of that as well. So the light duty vehicles are more like distributed. MDHD is more clustered, more concentrated. And the methodology we have is that it's a very bottom-up approach, and we go to address level and basically use data like SIC codes and to know what type of facility we are talking about. Is it a warehouse? Is it a fleet depot? And then based on that, forecast the adoption for like how even like find the horizon value. What is that saturation point? What if all of them electrify? And then map the facility load to the nearest distribution feeder, distribution substation, and roll it up to substation level. And then based on the load behavior, which has a lot in common with LD forecast I mentioned, we can now evaluate the impact on the distribution side, for example, and look at different mitigation options such as managed charging or deploying DER on site for both, managing the costs of charging for these facilities and also to help to provide some services to the distribution system, relieving capacity shortage, etc. Just to wrap up, load forecast is getting more complex and more difficult. Many utilities, they really need to revise the way they forecast and how they address uncertainty. Based on that, planning is also getting more complex, both transmission and distribution, and we need more coordination between forecast, distribution, and transmission planning. Probably a middle point coordinated T&D planning led by transmission is looks like a good approach, open to other approaches too. But we need to look further ahead. It's like, driving. As you drive faster, because you have less time to take actions, you need to look further. Same thing with planning. If you are facing fast-paced growth like we are seeing today, you need to look beyond your usual timeframes. 5, 10, 20 is what people do, both forecasting and planning. We need to look at 30 years, 40 years, 50 years to make sure we have forecasts that can be used for sound planning. Thank you very much, and looking forward to the Qs and Xs.
Thank you, Farnaz. That was very thought-provoking. I really like that some of these emerging load growth trends actually may violate some of longstanding assumptions about how infrastructure is designed and put into place. That's very thought-provoking. So now we're going to switch gears quite considerably and pass it over to Lars Rover from Energy and Meteo, and he's going to talk about some recent research they've been doing with LiDAR and sky cams for very short-term forecasting, wind and solar.
Yeah, thank you, John. Let's move from the far future to more or less real time. So we are talking about short term, but more or less shortest short term, so forecast for the next minutes to mostly an hour. And is a small disclaimer at the beginning. So of course, even sky cams and LiDAR are nothing that you can scale for huge regions for your whole portfolio, but they might help forecasting the dips and max in the next minutes. So let's start with some company overview for the ones who have skipped the Tuesday and for the ones who were there, but it's always good to see it twice to keep us in mind. And yeah, we are from Germany. Our headquarters is in Oldenburg in northern Germany. We have more or less 250 employees at the moment. And yeah, we have operations at all continents in the US or Northern American markets. We do a lot of stuff with the ISOs, and yeah, we have over 20 years of experience. Some years ago, we just split a bit. So we just started with energy meter systems in the mid and with the wind and solar forecasts. But yeah, we just developed more and more as well a grid operation forecast. And we have a network platform that was more or less the topic yesterday. And we have a virtual power plant, yeah, which is most common used in the European market. And yeah, you can even trade and handle your whole portfolio with it. But yeah, let's start with the SkyCams. When you're an operator, for example, and you have yeah, a dominating PV plant, you really hate this weather situation. So convection with broken clouds, yeah, you really get a volatile feed-in or production, and you get mostly a lot of jumps in the shortest term forecast, because yeah, when mostly the measurements are in a dip, then the forecasts will yeah, sometimes rely on the dip, and then it's going up again, and then you have a lot of big jumps in the forecast. And the goal of using SkyCams is yeah, just let us predict the max and min values better. And the side effect, it's yeah, very interesting as well. It's growing that you need information about yeah, the potential production of farms. For wind, it's quite easy. You have for more or less for each turbine, you have wind measurement data. These data are mostly available even for us, and you can just use these informations for another potential production. For solar, it's not that easy. So when you have one weather station in a big solar plant, then there's a shadow on the weather station, and then it says there's no production on the whole farm. But yeah, even on the bigger farms, that's not the right thing, what's happening. And so the information out of the SkyCams just can help to make an yeah, estimation of the potential production. So even the forecast and another estimation are the more motivation points here. And till now, we just use, of course, a lot of NVP data for our PV forecasts, as well as satellite data or even the measurement data we get from the farms. And now it's possible as a way to, as well, to use just the informations that are coming out of the SkyCams, or even known as all sky images. So that is how a SkyCam looks like, and it makes more or less an visible image of yeah, 360 degrees of the sky. And you mostly need for one farm at least 2 single SkyCams, or in a research project we had over 25 SkyCams which were installed in northwestern Germany. And when then you have a bigger network, and then of course yeah, it works better, and you can have a look at a bigger region, and yeah, this might help more, but more or less for most of the farms, 2 SkyCams can be enough. And yeah, the SkyCams just made this visual image, and then a bit magic happens, and then we just get the irradiance maps out of these information with a resolution of 30 seconds. And yeah, we just don't install the SkyCams, and we just don't yeah, make this magic. So this is the DLR research company from Germany doing. We just use the information which are coming out of the magic. So why SkyCam and no satellites? Satellite has mostly the view from right above the clouds, and not the view of the PV plants. And it's quite hard to interpolate you know, the position of the cloud to the yeah, you know, to the shadow. And yeah, the SkyCam just can detect and track the clouds, and it even has the same perspective at the PV plants. And yeah, when you have more SkyCams, you just can propagate the shadows more in the future, and you can use this information as a forecast. If I would have known before that I have 20 minutes, then I could have shown some interesting videos here, but now just a screenshot. But we have the videos available, or movies available. So if you're interested, just contact us afterwards, and probably we can show you some interesting stuff there. But on the left-hand side, you can see the map, which is coming out of the information in more or less blue. There are the clouds on the sky, and in the green to yellow, there's the clear sky more or less. And on the right side, you just can see in black the measurement. These are the measurements. We have a little PV plant on our company, and we even have a SkyCam on our company. And yeah, it's both combined. So on the right side, in black, is the measurement from our PV plant. And in red is the measurement out of the information from the SkyCams. So it does match quite well, not perfectly, but quite well most of the times. And yeah, that's quite helpful. And now we just can make a forecast with the SkyCam information. So the green one here is power, which is coming, or the power forecast, which is coming out of the SkyCam information. The black one is the real measurement. Of course, at 1 p.m. here, we don't know which black one will come in, but we are in the maximum. And yeah, the blue one is the normal shortest term forecast. And then yeah, we don't add the full SkyCam nowcast into our forecast. We just use these as an additional information, and we put this information into our normal short-term correction. So it's not relied directly on the SkyCam forecast, but we use this extra information to calibrate our short-term forecast. So and when we do it, we see very good improvements, even in the first 15 to 30 minutes. And on average, it could be an improvement of about 20% RMSE. And when we have a lot of convection, a lot of broken clouds, then it's even up to 40%. So these are the pros. We did it, as I told you, with a bigger research project in northwestern Germany. And we have a lot of convection there, and it worked quite well. We did it in other ones, even in Asia, for example. And yeah, there are even some problems. So mostly when you are in regions with a lot of dust, then the SkyCams have quickly problems because they can't see the sky very clear anymore. And so that is one of the problems when you're in regions with dust or anything else, which can make the work for the SkyCams even worse. That was a quick overview for PV. Then we have done more or less the same just for wind. It's called WindRAM. That's a research project from Germany or Europe. It's with diverse project partners. You can see their logos down there. It's the mission is enhancing offshore wind power forecast to improve balancing capabilities for grid operators and energy traders, or in short, just make the short-term forecast better. And yeah, we just want to focus on wind ramp events, and they are very hard to forecast and can create massive imbalance. Why? At the moment in the North Sea, in front or on the coastline of Germany, we have more or less 10 gigawatts installed capacity, and it will grow to 25, 30 gigawatts in the next years. And the area is as big as the metropolitan region of Los Angeles. So there's 30 gigawatts more or less in Los Angeles. And when you then have some convection or even some up and downs there, it's very hard for the network operators. And that's why they just want to get any more information they can get. And on the right side, you can see this wind cube. These are the LiDAR systems. So there were 2 installed. One can approximately see 6 kilometers wide and the other one 10 kilometers. They are looking just into the west because most of our weather in the North Sea comes from the west. So it's most important to know what's coming in from the west. Here's the offshore wind park. It's called Nordergründe. It's an older and smaller one, but it's near to the coastline. So it's good for the setup and things like that. So that's why they just choose this one. And as well as for Skycam, we just want to integrate extra information out of the LiDAR into our short-term forecast for offshore wind farms. I think most of you just know a typical meteorological ramp. It's not that steep, but yeah. And they mostly are under forecast in an upward ramp. And yeah, that's what we want to make better. And we just want to evaluate the benefit of using this LiDAR information. And what we're doing as well is just we are doing statistical evaluation of ramp events. So there was a bit of meteorological manual work on it, so that we just had a look at the ramp events in the time, and had analyzed, say how steep they were, and how far away the forecast was. And at the end, in the first step, the goal was to create a situational awareness report for the grid operator, so that he just knows if this ramp will come in probably steeper, or when the exact timing of the ramp will be. And as you just have seen it for PV, it's more or less the same. So here in red is a LiDAR forecast out of the LiDAR information. And then there in green and blue, our normal short-term forecast and the short-term forecast with added information out of the LiDAR forecast. So it's not just the LiDAR measurement, it's even a bit, so the LiDAR can have a look in the future, more western, what winds are happening there. And so you have an about 15-minute forecast out of the LiDAR information, and you can add this information into our normal short-term forecast. On the right-hand side, you can see the RMSE. So in old times, the RMSE is smaller than during the ramp events. And what you can see as well is that the information added due to the LiDAR into our short-term correction, it gets to an improvement, even mostly in the first 15 to 30 minutes. But we are talking a lot about uncertainty forecast, and we have tried the same with the LiDAR information. So we just made a weighted ensemble out of the information with 50 members and one control run, and try to do a resolution of 3 hours. And what we saw here is that you have even improvement when you use this ensemble information. It's better mostly than having just the base forecast. But if you have direct measurement data from the farm and more or less real-time data from the farm, then it's better to use this information for the first 15 or 30 minutes. So there can be an improvement with LiDAR information, but in short term, so for the first 15 minutes, it's even better to use the measurement data out of the farm if you have them. And that's all about the wind and the PV.